Hey everybody, welcome back to the Castle Rock Men's Health Caveman Agenda podcast. We just had a gripping, amazing ICU journey for well over a month, and we've just gotten discharged out of the ICU and back to Josh. Josh, what happens next?
Yeah, so I head on home and think that I'm going to have a nice, smooth recovery at this point.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. I didn't, but I was hoping.
Right. Not.
So I go home and then I start having complications again with low oxygen. I start having complications again with severe side pain and chest pain.
Yeah.
And so I call my doctor and they say that I need to go back to the hospital, but they wanted me to go to a specialty hospital that actually was more focused on lungs, and it happened to be a hospital that dealt with cancer.
And that was and that's more that's still in, we'll say, the eastern range of Colorado.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct. And the concern was, and of course this was a concern that I was told before I left the ICU, is with the scarring tissue and the abscess with the fungal infection and things, one of the options that may end up having to happen was they were going to have to cut off the bottom part of my lung. And so they told me I needed to go to this other hospital because if they had to do that, that's where the specialists were that do this for cancer patients.
Got it. So we got the lung resection specialist, Marcus Welby, MD.
Yeah, so I go there, I check in. It wasn't my first rodeo at that point, but obviously I had a lot of anxiety from already being in the hospital.
You were like, okay guys, the IV goes in this way. You need to hook it to a pump. This is where the blood pressure cup goes. You know all this shit now. You're practically a registered nurse.
Well, I actually brought my own mask because I had one that was more comfortable than others. They thought that was weird.
I love it.
But so I go there.
You know what? They're just sad they can't charge you $85 for that mask.
It's probably true.
All right.
I go there. I check in. They take a bunch of tests. They're on the fence back and forth with infectious disease and their doctor with whether or not they want to cut out that bottom part of my lung or whether they want to see what's happening. It hasn't shrunk, but it hasn't grown. Just all those things in consideration. So they basically keep me for observation while I continue to get x-rays and things and CT scans and stuff on a regular basis for, I think it was 6 days. At which point I started feeling better. I wasn't having the side pains, things anymore. And I basically made the decision because they wouldn't make a decision. They were kind of concerned. But I said, look, we're either going to do something or I'm going to leave. Because I'm not going to sit here and just wait to die, essentially.
Yeah.
So I left.
That's probably what they were looking for.
So they were waiting to see what was going to happen, and
they're waiting for you to make a decision.
Yeah. So I made the decision of
so that they don't have to man up, and then they can, when it comes to medical malpractice time, they can point the finger at you.
Yeah.
God, I hate to call it like it is, but that's just the way it is.
So I ended up checking myself out at that point, and
did they make you sign like against medical advice forms and stuff?
No, at that point I think the doctors had agreed, so it wasn't. I didn't have to sign any of that. It got to a point where I just was being a little more pushy on either discharge me or treat me for whatever it is.
It's going to be really interesting to get a hold of their wording in their medical documents, because I see this all the time with patients. The patient will be like, oh, my doctor loves me and he said that I can do whatever I want. And then in the documentation, they're like, this patient decided they didn't want to do what I wanted to do. They left against my medical advice. I just didn't make them sign a form. It's bizarre, bro.
Oh, crazy.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, so, Josh, we've had a couple of questions from our listeners, but this one was I really like it. It really hit home. The question from our viewer is, throughout this whole process, did they insist, request, or advise in any capacity that you receive a vaccination?
Yes.
And was that like on the regular or?
Every time I check into a different place, the first question was I vaccinated? And the second question was, do I want to get vaccinated? And then generally after the doctor would see me, they'd say they recommended that I get vaccinated.
Got it. And there's clearly an entire conversation because, by the way, we're filming April 2023 where the data is in on vaccines in multiple capacities. I don't even think we have the time to jump into that, but it's a really hella interesting perspective that you've had this mad COVID infection. You have clearly an insane immune response to that now, and yet someone is still requesting vaccination. It's like you got chicken pox, but I want you to get a chicken pox vaccine.
Yep.
That doesn't ever happen. It doesn't happen.
Yep.
Yeah, they recommend influenza, but they miss more than they hit on the efficacy of that. It's just a bizarre request in medical thought process, but I think the entire system got off the rails with this COVID thing. That's my response to that question. Thanks for asking, guys. So we're back to you're leaving because they ain't doing anything.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
and what month are we in now?
we're in the second week in February.
2022.
Yep.
Copy.
And so I get out. I have, and when I say a lot, I mean literally a lot of follow-up appointments. I have regular appointments with a pulmonologist. I have regular appointments with the infectious disease doctor. I still have to go back and get CT scans and X-rays. And at that point, I got out, and it was nice to be at home, but I didn't get away from the regular things that were still happening. And then that kind of started dying off as I stayed, out of the hospital, but I was still on antibiotics for a solid 5 months until May. I was still on antifungals until May. The antibiotics, I actually went a month after the antifungals. That would have been in June. And just the concern is that anything would flare back up or come back, and that they weren't sure. They didn't know. They literally told me they don't know. They don't know if it's going to come back. They don't know what it was. They don't know. All they know is that it went away, and whatever they were giving me caused it to go away or subside. And so we're just going to leave you on that until we're 1,000%. Big issues where the antifungal has all kinds of conflicts, I guess, with other medications and other things.
For sure.
And so I had a whole list of things I couldn't do or couldn't take when I was on the antifungals. Of course, while I was on it, I didn't feel great. Even after I started feeling better from a breathing perspective, I was still on home oxygen, so I had a concentrator at home. And of course, the funny thing was, and this is where I started to kind of feel for some of the older people out there that are on oxygen. So I got told I needed to be on oxygen, but then they give me this big giant tank that weighs like 20 pounds and I'm supposed to lug around if I go somewhere.
Right.
But I already can't breathe.
Right.
So then I'm supposed to lug around something that's heavy that makes it harder for me to breathe, that's supposed to help me breathe. And then you have to have a prescription to get a concentrator that's portable, that's $1 bazillion.
Speaking of $1 bazillion, we do have another question from the viewers, and that is, what do you have any idea of what your total medical expenses were? Not just out of pocket, but total bill to your insurance company.
I don't. I know it was well over several hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know above and beyond that. That's what all I had visibility of.
Do you know what you had to pay out of pocket?
Well, I hit my max amount of pocket. I have a max amount of pocket plan. And so it was a little over 10 grand. I think when it was all said and done, maybe 13.
That's a score.
And then, so of course, the second half of the year, any little thing that I needed, I went and took care of.
Absolutely. I got to hang now. Going into the podiatrist. All right.
So after about June, going into July and August is probably when I felt the best sense. So we're talking 8-9 months later. And I still wasn't 100%. I still had issues. Like if I walked upstairs, I'd feel lightheaded.
Got it. So before this, you're doing mad exercise, eating great, looking great. Now you're not exercising at all because you get short of breath.
Yeah, I can't literally not walk upstairs without getting short of breath. Right. I packed on. I was almost pushing 200.
Which was how much of a weight gain?
25 pounds, 26 pounds. I went from 17% body fat up to 29.
Has it affected your sex life?
Everything. Absolutely.
Got it.
Drive, just in general, my energy in general. I get tired by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And you haven't worked, and so how did it impact the business?
It was a huge impact. I mean, I literally was trying to work from my deathbed because, owning your own business.
Well, I'm feeling you.
I mean, it's what do you do? Either I'm going to win and stay alive and everything's going to win, or I'm going to die and everything's going to lose.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of that mentality. So it wasn't really a lot of options. And I mean, I literally had employees coming in and doing a meeting in my ER with tubes sticking out of me. Just because that's who I am.
That's how it works.
So,
great.
I had a lot of good partners though that helped me kind of get through it all and were understanding. Of course, we had just expanded, so that was tough.
Yeah.
Going through an expansion with all this happening wasn't a help. And then now as we're getting even a year into it, it's just been it's really been draining to be tired every afternoon. And so now I've started looking into alternatives.
That's a great segue, because one of the reasons that we had decided on this podcast is you came to see me a couple days ago, and you were really frustrated with having to go back on antibiotics every 5 weeks. You were disgusted with your oxygen levels, the coughing, the repeat pneumonias, and so we just sent some more ivermectin to a compounding pharmacy. Tell the viewers how things are going just in 3 short days? 4?
Yeah, so to back up just a hair on that too, once I got off the antibiotics and antifungals in June, I started having this cycle of every 5 to 6 weeks where I would get an upper respiratory infection, and then it was a 50-50 chance on pneumonia. And if I got pneumonia, I was out for 2 weeks. And then I'd have another 2 weeks, so basically it was very difficult to breathe.
Yeah.
And so after several cycles of that, which leads us into February of this year in March, I started getting frustrated with that, started checking in alternatives, and that's when I reached out to you. And every time I would always get prescribed the same thing. It was some sort of antibiotic along with prednisone. Prednisone would make me feel good for about 4 or 5 days, and then once I was off of that, I'd start taking a dump again. And then the antibiotics, if they gave me anything less than a 10-day dose, it was a joke.
Yeah.
But going through 2 to 3 weeks of recovery every time just was starting to wear thin on me. And then, of course, having them show me my lungs and talk about scarring got even worse.
Yeah.
So anyways, I came in, and the biggest thing that I noticed is when I talked to you, I was having a hard time breathing. I was probably on average, I think I was when in your office, I was at 89 is what you guys took my oxygen at. And so I started taking the ivermectin that afternoon. Ivermectin boosted my oxygen up 4 points. So I jumped.
How quickly?
The next afternoon, so about 30 hours, 36 hours. I went from 89 to 93,
and there's
94.
nothing different that you did in your life?
No, because I was still on the stuff that they had already given me because I had 2 more days of that
crazy.
left. The only thing that I changed was as I added the ivermectin for that last 2 days, I was still taking the other.
You went from being off of the cliff to be securely on top of the cliff.
Yeah.
The oxygen cliff I was talking about before.
Yeah, and I mean, I still obviously don't feel like I want to feel, but at least I could breathe.
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel like I couldn't breathe. Like I couldn't take a deep breath.
Yeah.
It was felt like an elephant sitting on my chest. And now it doesn't.
So let me wrap this up. You've gone through the what we'll call just the standard medical industrial complex thing, and now you've taken this first step with an alternative, and you're already seeing some objective improvement. And so now what the viewers really want to hear about is now you're really going full off the reservation, IV stem cell therapy, and like repeatedly, and even getting some spine work done. And that's what's coming up in our next segment. So don't you dare go anywhere. Come back and let's finish this thing up with Josh's planned stem cell journey, and really looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.